Welcome to the Blue Room Weekly on a week that has lost a bit of momentum if you're an Everton fan. We went into that first game of the season against Leeds, all buoyant by the signings of Jack Grealish and the way things seem to be going, and obviously the new stadium on the horizon, and then suffered what was a pretty miserable defeat on Monday night. And then the Toffees look forward to playing Brighton at home in the first official competitive game at the Hill Dickinson Stadium on Sunday. And joining me on tonight's Weekly to talk all about that, I've got Paul McPartlin, I've got Keith Tomlin, and joining us on the Weekly for the first time is Adam Sutton as well. So I'm really grateful for all the lads for joining us. And what I want to do first, lads, and I'll come to you first, Keith, is just get the final word really on Leeds, because I was so excited to see Everton again. And I know we've had a lot of tough seasons in the last few years, but it just felt like there was a bit of momentum going into the game based off what had happened on the back of last season with the final game at Goodison, and then that result at Newcastle, and obviously some of the signings we've made as well. And then we all got brought back down to earth with a massive, massive bump, didn't we? Just your assessment on the Leeds game.
I think if you had to give it one word, it would be insipid. There was nothing about it to feel positive about. I think, like you said, we all went in with a little bit of confidence. And then obviously in the days running up to it, we found out that Jared Branthwaite was injured. And Mikalenko was out, and the new left back apparently is injured as well. And Patterson was out. So we ended up playing this makeshift back four. And I think when we saw the lineup and everyone sort of figured out that James Garner was playing at left back, everyone thought we were in for a little bit of a rough ride at times. But still, it was, that Leeds, you look at that Leeds lineup, that's not an 11 to inspire fear. And yet they had us playing like sort of 11 lads who'd never kicked a ball together before, like they'd been thrown together half an hour before kickoff. There was no cohesion. There was no, like, we struggled with any sort of forward movement in that first half. And it was painful to watch, and it was echoes back to a lot of the terrible stuff that we've seen under Dyche and under Lampard and under Benitez and whatnot beforehand, where there was just nothing about Everton to get behind. So a slight improvement. It was impossible to get worse. Obviously, the introduction of Jack Grealish, I thought he looked at least positive, trying to carry it forward. Dewsbury Hall put a shift in. But it's worrying signs, isn't there? About that squad as it stands right now, there's worrying signs.
Well, the thing is with it, my argument has been all pre-season, even without the expected signings I thought we would have made by now. I still was of the belief that the 11, potential strongest 11 Everton could put out could be a decent Premier League team. You know, I'm not saying should be climbing, the heights of European places, but should be a very solid mid-table team. And I think when that team sheet came out, Adam, I think it really showed, didn't it, the lack of depth that we've got. And I think if it only takes, Keith mentioned there about the injury to Branthwaite, Mikalenko, for all his critics, and, maybe he isn't one of the most appealing names on the team sheet, but when you miss that balance on the left-hand side, to add to what we haven't got on the right-hand side, it really looked like one lopsided team, didn't it? And I think it just really showed that we need bodies in quickly. But when you look at that team and it's got James Garner starting at left back, who ironically was our best player, I thought, as well. It says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think football is massively about balance, isn't it, really? I feel you can have 11 brilliant players on the pitch, but if there isn't that cohesion, then sometimes you struggle to make a mark on the game. And what Keith just said there is right, but probably Leeds fans looking at that Everton 11 thinking, we can have these here. And I feel like that was again, a really slow start. And I know we've all played football in some capacity, but I'd imagine we've all played games where you start bad and it's so hard to get out of that rut. And I think that was a massive part of Monday for us. There was so many things on their side or against us, so to speak, in terms of first game back in the Premier League, crowd is up for it, under the lights, on telly, the whole world watching, really. And Everton just never got going at all, did they? And then as soon as you set your stall out for a slow start, the crowd are up. They're two fullbacks for me, not thinking too tactically, totally killed us off, really. I think, actually, in terms of David Moyes compared to Daniel Farke, he's got it totally wrong there, in my opinion. The 11 we put out should be beating a team that's just come up from the Championship. But if you've got your two of your better players moving forward, the likes of Njai and Charlie Alcaraz, who are basically playing as a secondary right and left back, you're never going to be able to get on the ball and progress forward, really. So, as I say, we kind of made a rob for our own back in those first 15, 20 minutes and very much struggled to change the flow of the game following that.
I was just really disappointed, Paul, with the lack of aggression. I mean, you can play poorly, and you can, the tactics, like Adam's just mentioned there, can be wrong, or the system that we played with the players we had available, it clearly wasn't right that first half. But what really left a bitter taste in my mouth and left me disappointed was the lack of aggression. I just think Leeds played like a team who had been used to winning and used to doing well every week. And like Adam quite rightly said there, there's a reason Sky picked it for the Monday night, because, the crowd were going to be up for their first game back. They're at home. And I just think Everton didn't match the Leeds' intensity in that first half. We were talking just before we started recording, and I heard you say, Paul, that you thought we got into it second half. I agree. I think we got better as the half went on, and you did feel like if there was a goal going to go in, it would have been an Everton goal, albeit us not playing very well. But is there any signs of hope there from that second half for you that we can go into the game on Sunday with a bit of positivity?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to go into the game with some positivity, given that we lost to. I mean, me and Keith talked about this before. I thought Leeds were a bang average size. I mean, the type of side that if you met them halfway through the season, we'd be winning that game quite easily. But the problem is, as Adam outlined before there, when you're playing a promoted team at home on a Monday night, their first game of the season, when, as you said there before, they're used to winning at home, they're on a buzz, they're on a roll. It's always going to be a difficult game. And I thought after 20 minutes, okay, we kind of calmed them down a bit. We quietened the crowd down. I was looking for us to push on, but we never pushed on. And it was really frustrating because the lack of pace in the team again, which has been a real problem the last few seasons as well. It was kind of the lack of linkage between the back four, the midfield, and Besso, who, okay, he was very isolated, but I always thought he could have got more involved in the game, drop back a bit, try and contribute a little bit more. So I thought tactically, as Adam quite rightly points out there, we were exposed. And on the second half performance, we had lots of possession. I saw some encouraging signs there, particularly Jack Grealish in the second half. But Dewsbury Hall had a much better second half as well. And I thought, we can go on and win this game. But, whatever the rights and wrongs of the penalties, once they got that penalty, the game's over. And why bring Thierry Barry on with like 3 minutes to go? I mean, what's he supposed to do in that situation when we're desperately chasing the game? So I think tactically we got the system wrong. I agree with you. I thought James Garner had a remarkably encouraging game at left back. But I mean, I looked at this fixture start of the season. If we lose this, and then we're playing home against Brighton, against whom at home we've got a terrible record the last 4 seasons. Then straight away after 2 games, we're struggling. I'm more concerned with matters off the pitch than on the pitch, to be honest. We're kind of in the same situation again, where we're kind of faffing around the bargain basement, trying to get players who probably aren't the initial quality that we wanted. We're probably going for our 3rd, 4th choice, 5th players in certain positions. And the lack of depth in the squad really does need to be addressed, because it's a very worrying scenario for Everton at the moment.
Just touching briefly for the final time, Keith, on the depth of the squad. I mean, my thing has been it's not going to all be done in one transfer window. And I look at Newcastle, for instance, as an example. When the money came in there and when they started getting the investments, it didn't turn straight away for them. They did have to have a couple of seasons where they had to gradually build, and they've got a very efficient and decent side now. Well, albeit everything what's going on with Isak at the moment, but for me, I felt that it wasn't going to all turn, and it wasn't all going to be sunshine and roses just off the back of this summer. I think where we've all been left disappointed, though, is Moyes said, didn't he, at the back end, we need to get players in. And I think my concern is I just feel like the momentum's gone a little bit. I think that in the last, it was only 8-9 days ago we signed Jack Grealish, and everyone was so excited and so happy, and it felt like we could kick on. And then, as you mentioned, the injury to Branthwaite, and now I think when people have seen that first team sheet go live, I think it's been a massive wake-up call for a lot of people. And I think the urgency, especially online, is now we need to get signings in and we need to get people in, because it only takes 1 or 2 injuries for that squad to look completely out of its depth, which it was. And it couldn't handle the Leeds. Certainly first half, couldn't handle the Leeds' intensity. And then second half, you just thought, yeah, if Leeds score here, it's game over. But are you disappointed, Keith, that momentum that we had, back end of last season, the signing of Jack Grealish, just seems to have evaporated really quick, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Sorry, to finish that question, is it fair that it's evaporated? Should we allow the club a bit of time to sort this out?
No, I don't think we should, because I think what you've said there, nobody's expecting this to have been a complete overhaul in one window. Nobody thought we were going to have a challenging squad by the end of September this year. What we did expect was learn from the mistakes of the past. Right back, right midfield. We haven't signed a proper right back or a right midfielder now in 5 years. Little stopgap loans. Ashley Young coming in to replace Seamus Coleman, who was actually older than Seamus Coleman. Like, the issues have been glaring for so long, and Everton have neglected it. So no, they don't deserve any sort of leeway on that front, in that we're going to be 2 games into the season without having addressed 2 of the most important areas in the squad. And they've had not just all summer, they had all of January, they've had the last few years to granted, there's been the financial issues and probably stopped them going out and sort of signing a long-term solution in either of those positions. But the recruitment there has not been great. Jack Harrison came on loan one season, flattered to deceive, really, had a couple of good moments. So they brought him back, give him another go. Like I said, Ashley Young, they signed Ashley Young to replace Seamus Coleman, despite the fact I think he's 2 years older than him. Patterson looks like a bust. I thought he was going to be a lot better than he was. He just doesn't seem to have got up to the standard of Premier League football. His body doesn't seem to be able to cope with the rigors of it. He's always out injured. So they've known this. They've known this since January coming into this summer. And the Friedkins were in place last January coming into this summer. And they've had time to address transfer concerns over the summer, leading into the summer, and they haven't. And like I say, we're going to be 2 games into the season. 2 of the most important positions are still unresolved. Will they get them done by the end of the month? I mean, you look at targets now. They've been after your man Dibbling from Southampton for about a month. They've been trying to sign him and going back and forward. Then they stepped away from the table. Now it looks like Spurs are going to come in and sign him because Eze's gone off to Arsenal instead. So that's one off there. Who's your next cab off the rank? What's the solution? Why aren't we seeing movement on that front?
Do you know what? I agree with so much of what you've said there. And I think that, Tottenham coming in potentially for Dibbling, Everton couldn't be blamed for. And I think we'd all accept that. But however, the whole right wing, right back thing, it's becoming a real cliche now, isn't it? But it's becoming a cliche because we've all known that we've needed it. And I think in some ways, maybe if Kenny Tete does sign, that solves an issue and that solves a problem. And I think maybe the club had banked on maybe that coming in or having that right back done earlier on in the summer. And, maybe there's not as much of a backlash towards the recruitment team at the moment for if we get that done. But again, it just feels very all ifs, ands and maybes, Adam. And do you think Keith's fair in what he says there? Do you think that it is some of the club's faults, all of the club's faults, or should Everton have done better knowing what they needed when we finished that last game in May?
Yeah, they need to have been preparing for this part of the season. We look back to last season and we've basically thrown August away, haven't we, really? And when you're not in a position to be bringing in good quality signings in January, you've got to have a good start to the season after the summer. So, yeah, it's glaringly obvious to everyone. And you hear the murmurs around social media and news outlets that Everton are in for a right winger and a right back. It's obvious we were with the Kenny Tete situation. But whether I'm right or wrong here, I really don't know. But there must be something internally that is stopping them from doing something about it. Because I understand the Grealish thing. It's probably something that's come up and been an opportunity, and they've gone for it. And again, there has been rumours around the Freakins wanting a marquee signing, but a marquee signing for me is also a signing that's in a position that's required, really. And listen, we're all going to be excited when Jack Grealish rocks up to Bramley Moor on Sunday afternoon. But at the same time, it is a papering over of the cracks to a certain extent. And as I said in the first point, balance is huge in football. And you look at the likes of Charlie Alcaraz, you look at the likes of Iliman Ndiaye playing the last 15, 20 minutes on the right-hand side, James Garner in at left-back, Jake O'Brien, who I thought was really, really poor on Monday, and I've been massively impressed with him. He looked all out of sorts. Again, I don't know whether I think his partner's heavily pregnant. Does that play into his way of thinking the game and stuff? But again, like that, it shouldn't necessarily be an issue, but it's definitely something that David Moyes can look at and think, well, if he's got a couple of options there, he might be able to choose a different way of going about things, really. So, in short, they've let this momentum that we've built up over the past couple of months slip. But again, come 10-2 on Sunday afternoon, hopefully all will be forgotten to a certain extent, because Everton fans are excited to get there. It's a brand new start. Granted, we wanted to be in a better position here, but there just needs to be something that the recruitment team and David Moyes are working on, which just comes out of the blue. And knowing David Moyes for his first tenure at the club, he did have a way about doing things like that. Again, probably a long time ago, where the likes of sources and ITKs weren't as strong with their opinions and their links, for want of a better phrase. But you just want the club to be making strides and the right strides. And listen, we don't want 60, 70, 80 million pound players. We don't want 10 number 10s as we did when we first were rich under Mashiri. We just want good, proven players, or some exciting unknown South Americans that we can all at least get excited about and start to raise the momentum and start to raise the moods across the fan base, really. So, listen, I think we will get there. I've got faith that there will be some signings and the right signings, because if you're taking this long, then they better be the right signings. But again, we can't be throwing away 2, 3, 4, 5 games in the start of the season, especially with the run that we've got, because these are a lot of winnable games here, and Everton get off to a good start at that stadium, it's going to really propel us. If they get off to a bad start with this stadium, then you're talking West Ham, aren't you, really? And people start to ask questions and feel a certain type of way. So, yeah, I totally agree with what Keith is saying. I just hope that there's something bubbling under the surface that we're not quite up to date with just yet.
Again, I mean, I was listening to you there with reference to Jake O'Brien, and I think that you think that something like, you mentioned there's a very sort of real human thing that he's got going, a life-changing event in his career where his partner's, about to give birth. And like you said, it's when we talk about 1%ers in football, him having that in the back of his mind, and is his wife okay, and is she, that's the type of thing, like you quite rightly said, well, let's bring someone else in, just to if we can bring him on, we can do, but you don't know if that has affected them. And again, it goes back to, and I think you make a great point with it, Adam, the lack of depth in the squad, because if we'd have had someone there to maybe just this one game, give Jake O'Brien time on the bench, or, be with his partner, whatever it is, but we simply didn't have that option, so he's essentially being forced to play. I think, Paul, now as well, that the more and more it goes by that we didn't re-sign Ashley Young for another year, the more it's looking a little bit questionable, because I think he slots into that game. And I think Ashley Young, for all the criticism and all the negativity I had on him in the past, I think he would have been the type of character to slip in there at Ellen Road on Monday and just not let the atmosphere faze him, not let him bother him, and do a very dependable job like he did at Newcastle away at the back end of last season. And it just feels to me now, Paul, that like there's a real opportunity missed and there's a real momentum missed. And I've titled the show tonight, where's the momentum gone and how do we get it back? And, obviously a win on Sunday, like Adam said, we'll put that to bed. But I just feel a little bit let down. And I know the nature of the transfer market at the moment. I know we've had issues in the past financially, so maybe we've got to regulate ourselves a bit better. I know that we're maybe waiting for other teams to make signings so that we can make signings. We know the nature of the modern day transfer market isn't as simple and isn't as straightforward as just going, right, we want that player, get him in, because there's agents to deal with, there's different clubs to deal with, everything else. So in that respect, I'm willing to give Everton a small pass. But like the lads have said, we should have had something sorted by now in some of these key positions, shouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely one. And when you think, it was common knowledge we were losing 10, 11 players during the summer. So basically, the recruitment should have started, from the first day of June to make sure we had covering those key positions as well. And the point you make about Ashley Young is a really good point. Yeah, I wasn't Ashley Young's biggest fan, but he was a utility player. He could offer you cover in midfield, right back, left back. So to lose somebody like him, you need somebody of a kind of a similar player who can multitask to fill in those places. We haven't got that at all. And yeah, I mean, it's we've known the situation with so many players leaving that we had to replace so many players. So at the moment, we're 50% down compared to players we brought in, compared to players that have left. So it's left the club incredibly short of depth as well. I was kind of thinking as well, like last season, we had 5 players on a loan. I mean, at the moment, we just got 1 player on a loan. So you're kind of wondering, well, should we be investing in the loan market a bit more? It's somebody else there we can bring in. But you can't go into a Premier League season undercooked with players missing in key positions. You're going to be exposed. We kind of saw that at Leeds as well. And yeah, I mean, you kind of hope against Brighton on Sunday it's going to be a different team performance in the new stadium and team be lifted by that. But you look at that 11 that starts against Leeds. If that's the 11 that starts against Brighton on Sunday, then I've got huge concerns. And in terms of the, I thought it was quite interesting on Monday evening that there were lots of critics about offering Michael Keane a new contract. If he'd not been given a new contract, who would have filled in a centre back there? We'd have been really struggling there to cover that position. So sometimes there is an argument for keeping on players whose contract is ended. But you wonder. We've had a problem with goal scoring for like 3-4 years now. I don't see any way we found the solutions to that problem. I don't think Becker's the long-term answer. Obviously, Tierno Barry, inexperience, he might turn out to be a really good player. We just don't know. And I always kind of wonder during the summer, the likes of like Callum Wilson, who went to West Ham. You look at was somebody like him being okay as a backup striker to come off the bench last 20 minutes to give you an alternative option, because you look at the Leeds game, and once Moyes tried to change it, it didn't really impact that much, did it? We had no shot on target in the first half, 1 shot on target on the second half, which is okay when you're playing away against Manchester City. But this is Leeds United away, a promoted team. This is a team you really should be imposing yourself upon. So, yeah, I do have mega concerns, as Adam, yourself, and Keith outlined there, about the lack of recruitment. And we've been reading loads of press releases about the change in Everton backroom staff, changing the leadership. There's a coherent strategy. I'm struggling to see any firm evidence of this at the moment, to be honest. And you just kind of really hope that we have got some players lined up under the radar, as I mentioned before, who might come in. But the closer it gets to the transfer window, you're just dreading a situation where, like a Neil Maupay situation, bringing somebody who's totally unsuitable on the last day of the season just to make up the numbers.
Just to chip in there, Warren, I think my mind's racing from Paul's points there, really, in terms of with the mass outgoings in the summer, and of course, you could almost say mass incomings this summer. It is a transition season, and I think we're all on board with transition when you're very much bedded into a Premier League campaign and you can understand what it takes to maybe, all right, finish 13th instead of 9th. But I'm looking around at all the teams here, and it's not doom and gloom, definitely not. But at the same time, there's some good sides in this league, and I'm convinced that 1 or maybe 2 of those 3 who have come up might be able to fight the way to stay up, actually. And again, that can't afford us to have a transition season, really, because it takes you a couple of bad months, really, and you really you are back into a relegation fight. And Everton fans have been through that enough, and we can't have it, not now, and definitely not with this new stadium and this new corner that we've supposedly turned.
I think that's a brilliant point, about the whole thing of, yes, it is transition, But I think we've all had now for the last 3-4 years been used to this really poor start in August and conceding 2 games, basically, what we've done, in recent times. So, and we've all known the problems. I think that's the thing. I think we can accept, like you said, Adam, we can accept they might not get every target, or, it's not going to be all of a sudden a top 8 team overnight. It's going to take a bit of work. But I think we all knew in May what we needed. We needed the striker, we needed a midfielder, and we needed to cover that right-hand side. And I think it just... Look, I'm not calling Everton out for not re-signing Ashley Young for any stretch, because I think if he'd signed a new contract, I think it would have been split opinion, a bit like the way Michael Keane was. But Paul's right in what he says. If Michael Keane doesn't sign that new deal, we are in bad shakes on Monday, because we've got no one in defence then. And I just feel that if we'd just had that little bit of cover just for this season in transition, knowing that Coleman's not fully dependable because of his injury record, and how he's not really played that many games in the last few years, and if you get 10 games out of him this year, it's a bonus. Knowing that Nathan Patterson, like Keith mentioned earlier, has not turned into the right back that I certainly thought he'd be, and knowing that we were a bit short at the back and it only takes one injury, for me, that just feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, and we need to rectify that pretty quickly. And it's just such a shame, because we came out of that last game at Goodison. I think we were all on a high. I know I certainly spoke on post-match about how this is the start of, Everton acting and behaving differently. And just feels like, again, a little bit same old Everton, particularly in the first 10 minutes of that performance. We'd all seen that script before, haven't we? And it turned out exactly the way that we thought it would. Penalty decision aside, it just felt very Everton again. But opportunity this Sunday to change all that around. And it is a really historic game, as we know, for the obvious reasons. The first game, competitive game at the new stadium. We had a couple of opportunities now to get there, most of us. And the Roma game was the first time that everyone was in there and it was full. I thought the acoustics of the place and how it looked on TV looked absolutely brilliant. It's one of the Sky games again at the weekend. It's bank holiday, so I think everyone's going to be really up for this one. And it's a chance to see, obviously Jack Grealish, who for me is probably the biggest, in terms of a Maverick player, the biggest signing we've had since James Rodriguez, who of course we didn't get to see because of COVID. So there is reasons to be positive. There is reasons to be optimistic. If I come to you first, Keith, what do you think? I mean, look, I'm sure we definitely all don't want to see that starting 11, but that we saw against Leeds. But how do you see it lining up, and how do you see it going on Sunday? Brighton themselves, I didn't think, from what I gathered, didn't perform brilliantly in their first game. Fulham obviously got that late equaliser, which maybe took a bit of the stuffing out of them. How do you see it going Sunday? Who do you think lines up for Everton on Sunday?
I mean, I hope he addresses the left back thing. Like even if I don't know when Mikalenko's back. I don't know if this new lad's still injured or what. If that's the case, and your 2 recognised left backs are out, you can't do what you did again on Monday. Now, that's not a slight on James Garner, because I thought James Garner played very well at left back. He coped really well with Dan James's pace. Leeds never really got anything down that side at all. It's what you lose in the midfield. And the drop-off from Garner to Irabunum is massive right now. In terms of ability and in terms of experience and knowing where to be on the pitch. Like Irabunum still looks like he's a little bit lost in that role. He's always sort of trying to make up ground to get back. So for me, if you haven't got a left back, one of the 2 left backs available Sunday, you put Dwight McNeil at left back and you put Garner back in the midfield next to Idrissa Gueye. It's still going to be Keane, Tarkowski, O'Brien, the other 3. I don't think there's any way, shape around that. Grealish has to start, doesn't he? Like he's had his sort of his warm up cameo now. He has to be starting. I thought Alcaraz was really poor on Monday. He didn't really offer anything to the game. So you stick Grealish in, you have that fluid front 3 with Grealish, Dewsbury Hall, and Ndiaye. I think he'll go with Beto. I still think he'll start with Beto. But it's kind of, how close are we to a last chance saloon out for Beto in terms of starting before he brings in this new 25-30 million pound striker and says, right, you're in, kid? Because Beto was terrible, wasn't he, Monday? It was just offered absolutely nothing. He didn't affect the game in any way, shape or form. So I think he will start with him, but I think if it's a similar sort of situation to Monday, I reckon he'll get the hook quite soon on.
Just addressing a couple of points that Keith made there, Adam, the midfield firstly, and I totally agree. I think that Irabunum looked just so out of his depth, and I think it's unfortunate because he actually had a good start to the season last year. He tailed off maybe after the 60-minute, 70-minute mark. I remember, the start of the season last year, but I've not exactly been James Garner's biggest fan at times. However, I think we missed definitely his workmanship, if you like, and just you talked so much and so eloquently about balance before, and I think Garner in that midfield next to Idrissa Gueye offers us that balance and offers Dewsbury Hall a chance to advance further forward in that midfield. So just on that, do you agree with Keith that it's probably, if we can find some sort of way of getting someone in at left back, James Garner has to return to the centre of that midfield?
Yeah, I'm quite the opposite with James Garner to yourself, Warren. I think, well, again, everyone deserves criticism across some point of the season, but I think James Garner's like one of the most technically gifted players in our squad, bar none. I think he's one of those players sometimes that, like, if you watch him, you realise how good he is. And when he's not there, you realise how much you miss him to a certain extent. I feel like coming through the academy at United and playing a lot of football here, there and everywhere can of course help, but then almost stunt your growth to a certain extent. But being so versatile will then also allow a manager to make a decision on you that you aren't that linchpin in the middle of midfield. And I feel like when he plays as the deepest of that three, really, alongside Idrissa Gueye, he does give that anchor, really. Again, Idrissa Gueye can go and engage and win the ball back and give the ball off to the likes of James Garner. But again, it does come back to balance, and Dwight McNeil at left back is scary for me. I really, really worry about him. I think he's a brilliant creative player, especially from a dead ball situation. But again, I would have been scared to death of Dan James running at him on Monday night. I feel like there has to be some way of getting James Garner back into the midfield. But if Mykolenko or Asnu aren't fit, he'll play him left back, I think, because I just don't feel like he would trust McNeil unless he goes with a back three of Keane, Tarkowski and O'Brien and maybe goes, I don't know, someone right wing back and Dwight McNeil left wing back just to offer that cover. But Everton turning up to the first game of the new stadium with a back five is just so Everton, isn't it, really? Let's be honest. And again, these are the questions and these are the answers that David Moyes needs to find. And you just hope and pray that Mykolenko is fit. He seems to have these injuries that just go away pretty quickly. Breaks his ankle one week and he's back in the squad a couple of weeks later, isn't he? So you never know. Again, you need players who are playing in their preferred position, and James Garner's preferred position is in the midfield. And as you've said, Warren, the likes of Keane and Dewsbury Hall and Idrissa Gueye will benefit from that. But with Beto and Barry, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because Beto was terrible on Monday. By the way, a lot of others were, and I would have hated to have played up top on my own on Monday. Everything that came into him was neck height, or there was no control. He's getting the ball, and granted, he's not the greatest at bringing it in and touching it off. He seems to bring the ball in well and then just boom it back to their attackers. You've got Charlie Alcaraz, who's almost wanting to get on the half turn every time he gets the ball, but again, it's sloppy and it's a bit rushed sometimes. So we need to get a real foothold on Sunday before we do anything, really, and whether that is making ourselves solid at the back and in midfield and allowing these attacking players to at least get on the ball high up the pitch. But again, in short, there has to be a couple of players who might be on the peripherals of fitness that need to come in and just allow the other players to be able to do what they're good at, really. Because if you square pegs round holes against Brighton, they will find the gaps. They're a good side, especially away from home. Again, I think they're actually better away from home than they are at home. But we'll see. Again, Jack Grealish in that starting 11 graphic on Twitter will turn everyone's head, and hopefully people won't notice that James Garner's playing left back again. But we'll see. I feel like atmosphere and the history of it, as you alluded to, Warren, will hopefully give us that extra boost. And you can have anyone playing in any position when the crowd's on top, can't you, really? So let's see. I'd love to see Tierno Barry. I'd love to see Jack Grealish. I'd love to see Kiernan Dewsbury Hall. These are the reasons you bring these players in. But again, we can't just be playing anyone and everyone when you need a side that is a well-oiled machine.
I'm inclined to agree with you on Beto, the point you made on Beto. I think Beto, for me, actually, in pre-season, looked one of the sharper players. I thought he looked really good. There was one of the Premier League games, one of the Premier League Series games he played, and I thought he looked really strong and really like a really decent centre-forward. And I know you can't always judge in pre-season, and I know maybe it's not the best way to gauge, how we perform this season, but I think he did enough last season to justify starting again. And I think, like you said, I think it was a great point, Adam, that he wasn't the only one who was awful. And I think had I been so isolated up front myself against Leeds on Monday, I think I would have struggled. I think we all would have struggled. So I'm inclined to give him a start. Paul, I heard you nodding away when the name Jack Grealish was mentioned, and I was a little surprised he didn't start on Monday. However, I could see the reasons behind it, because I don't think he has had much of a pre-season. I think he's obviously trained and done all the fitness, but he wasn't invited on a lot of the tours that City went on. He wasn't in the Club World Cup as well. He wasn't selected in the squad. So he hasn't had a lot of pre-season minutes. So I could see why he didn't start. And I honestly thought as well, if Everton could keep it 0-0 or 1 or whatever it might be on Monday, and then Jack Grealish comes on with 20 minutes left, anything can happen. For me, he has to start. Even if you bring him off after an hour, I think he has to start. I think just to give the fans and that ground a lift. But one of the things I noticed about him on Monday, and look, we've all seen Jack Grealish perform for Villa, City, England, so we know he's capable of this. But the reason we're crying out, I feel, for a right winger at the moment is we need someone who's quick, who can drive the ball forward and get it forward into our half, more direct. Because obviously, you're playing towards the opposition's goal, you're going to create more, you're going to be better. What we struggled with playing, and what we do struggle with playing an Alcaraz out there, is he hasn't got the speed to take on a defender. So often he'll come inside and he'll play it inside, or they might do little triangles, but they don't really get to the byline, maybe put a cross in, which we know Moyes likes to do. We know Moyes likes to get on the front foot in that respect. But one of the things I really appreciated, which I don't think any Everton players got the ability to do at the minute, is Jack Grealish would come deep and he'd travel with the ball. He's got that way of moving forward with the ball, and he's not the quickest by any stretch. He's not a fast. When you think of Jack Grealish, you don't think lightning pace, but he got Everton into threatening positions. He picked up a couple of free kicks, which we could maybe get set pieces from, and that's the thing we've really, really lacked for me. He has to start simply, doesn't he, Paul?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm with you, Warren. I totally understood why he didn't start against Leeds, because he's not been in training. He's not really match fit. So the last thing you want to do is bring in your star signing and see him get an injury after 10 minutes because he's not up to speed with the game. So I totally understand the logic behind that. Equally, I think it says the club desperately needs a boost at the moment. The fan base needs a boost after Monday night. So I think Jack Grealish has to start for all sorts of reasons against Brighton on Sunday. Going back to what Adam said there about Beto as well, if you're playing Beto, he can't play with his back to the defence. He's not that type of forward. He doesn't hold the ball up. That's not his strength. You saw the away game against Chelsea last season when the ball bounced off and they broke away and scored the goal. But what he is good at is running behind the defence when players play balls in for him to chase onto. Like him and Alcaraz created quite a few goals like that last season. So if you're going to play Beto, playing to his strengths, don't play in a position where he's going to be exposed and he's not going to contribute. The whole thing about the winger situation, we signed Tierno Barry. He's 6'5". I'm kind of guessing he's quite good in the air. Who's, apart from Jack Grealish on the left-hand side, who's going to be playing the crosses from the right-hand side to our new signing? Because we need, you said before, one that David Moyes likes to play crosses. You looked on Monday evening. I mean, Jacob Ryan's crosses were just abysmal. So you've got to have better quality on the flanks to get the best out of whoever's playing up front, be it Beto or be it Barry. I mean, looking at the formation for Sunday, to me, there has to be a place to Dwight McNeil. because I still think after Jack Grealish, he's our most creative player. And what frustrated me most on Monday evening was our creative players in Alcaraz, Dewsbury Hall in the first half, didn't really get in the game. And you're thinking, you've got good, talented players. Let them express themselves. Let them play the passes. And the point you made before there, one about Grealish, we've not had a player for a long time now who can run and keep control of the ball and penetrate the opposition defence. So he's going to create chances. He's going to win his free kicks. So for all those kind of reasons, he has to start on Sunday. And if he's only starting for 60 minutes, that's fine. But I just think it'll give the crowd a lift. It'll give the team a lift. And what we can't afford to do on Sunday against Brighton is to go down early on, because I can just see kind of the atmosphere starting to change slightly. So play Grealish from the start. Try and find a place for McNeil in the team. And whether it's Beto or Barry, whoever plays the forward point, I agree with Adam there on what Rose said there. If you're playing a striker, give him the service that he's going to benefit from.
Well, it certainly puts pressure on us losing that first game. We've got to come out the blocks really, especially the first game at the new stadium, and hopefully it doesn't take us too long of a settling in period when we go there. I can think of many teams down the years who've moved into a new stadium and struggled. So I hope I'm not putting the hex on it. But to finish off, lads, what I'll do, I'll come round each of you one by one, and I just want a prediction from you. Keith, how's Sunday going to go?
Heart says 2-0 to the terrible Toffees. Head says score draw.
Adam?
Heart says 2-0 to the terrible Toffees, and Head says score draw.
Right, Paul, you're on for the hat trick here.
This is going to sound like a record on my piece, but yeah, I think it's, my heart says 2-0 to the disjointed Toffees, and I think realistically Brighton will get a draw from the game.
Yeah, it's a funny one against Brighton, isn't it? Because they always seem to do us away from home, and we always seem to do them away from home. It's a funny little thing we've got going on with them. But yeah, it's certainly going to be a momentous day, and it's going to be historic for hopefully the right reasons. But it is that first game at the Hill Dickinson Stadium for Everton against Brighton, and I think I hate to be that person that sits on the fence. I can see score draw as well, unfortunately. I can see us maybe taking the lead and then them clawing their way back into it. They're no mugs. They're a good side. And I think they'll prove once again that they'll just be a solid, dependable Premier League team this year. And I mean, what a boost it would give. I think it just changed the whole atmosphere around the fan base, particularly online, if we can get a win. And then we can, go into the end of the window then with hopefully a few more players under our belt to settle in and, get into September with them and hopefully create some momentum that I feel that we've lost in the last week. But there we go. We'll leave it there for tonight. My thanks to Keith, to Adam and to Paul for coming on. It's been a brilliant show tonight. Don't forget that after the game on Sunday, the lads will be back with post-match, and then you've got all your usual shows coming up next week. Also, just a quick plug for tomorrow. It's the 200th mailbag tomorrow. So again, not only is the one historical thing happening this weekend, there's two. So make sure you tune into that. The lads will be on with mailbag again, and then all your usual stuff, as I said, next week with Blue Monday and the Byline with Paddy and with Matt. But we'll leave it there for tonight for the weekly. My thanks again to the lads for joining me. Have a brilliant weekend. Enjoy the first game at the new stadium, and let's hope the Everton team can get a win for us. Up the Toffees. We'll speak to you soon.